Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Always brave to come with this type of weather. It's going worse and worse. You know that summer is over, as you know. We start autumn already. This is Canada. It's not Israel. It's not any place warmer. Okay, we'll deal tonight with a painter that I would say is a little bit unusual to speak about, Stanley Cosgrove. Not that he's not heavily collected by a lot of people like his work, and I think he made a rather good living with his art. But among art historians, among art critics, he's considered, for whatever reason, less interesting, let's say, than the people we were dealing with last time, like Roberts or Lyman or Milne. And it is true that he never turned to abstraction, let's say. He never made abstract art. Always stayed traditionally figurative. And even, I would say, more than that, he got very faithful to the great genre in painting. The genre, you know, is what we call the still life, landscape, portrait. And I give you two landscape of his here, who are typical of his work, just to fix the idea about him. And so not only he never did abstract art, but also stay faithful to the great genre, to the genre of the painting. And mind you, the others also, Roberts, Lyman, or Milne, never went to abstract art either. And even Lyman was particularly negative on abstraction, saying that it's easier for the artist to formulate an abstract diagram than to create an organic reality. Yeah? And Lyman always kept this distance with these new movement and all that, like Cosgrove. Cosgrove was also accused to be repetitive. And you could see in these two pictures that are many years apart, you could understand if I show you 10 of them of the same type of nature like he did. In fact, you could say, well, maybe there's a problem, especially when you define in modern art, when you give much importance to novelty, to the newness of the necessity to renew yourself all the time, like many modern painters think is important to do. Certain art critics also have discussed, even when they were favorable to him, they have described his color like vaporous, hazy, not very bold, if you want, even milky, which is not a very great quality, I guess, for color, to be too milky, instead of vibrant and saturated, like it is clearly the case in many modern art. And finally, if certain critics have praised him because he resisted to all the fashions and the waves of the avant-garde, others says, well, it's a proof that he could not renew himself, and he got more or less forgotten by this critic, like even Jean-René Ostigui or people like that who were for him at the beginning and says, no, it's too repetitive, the guy doesn't know how to renew himself. And the other painter I want to allude at the end of this presentation, Marian Scott, you could see it's exactly the opposite. When I prepared this lecture, there was a lot of discussion about Marian Scott because there was a presentation of her work at the Musée du Québec and then at the Galerie de l'UQAM, and Esther Trépanier made an excellent book on her and all that, and we were all excited by this rediscovery of Marian Scott's work, and so I thought it would be interesting to confront both. And indeed, in terms of somebody who could renew herself, she was certainly an excellent example of that. Somebody with bold colored also, and with also a certain appetite for this abstract art that didn't interest Cosgrove. So in a way, pedagogically now that they are more apart, if you want, in our consciousness, they are interesting to confront because they seem to be so much opposed, one to the other. other. I think in both cases, to understand how it started, and if you want the story that explain a little bit their type of position, we have to go back to 1941. It's always an important year in Canadian art because there was a lot of debate, both in Quebec and also, I would say, in the rest of Canada. This is the date of a little exhibition organized in Quebec City. I show you the just a photo on the left of the cover of the catalog of this exhibition. It was called Première Exposition des Indépendants. Mind you, there was never others. There was only one. Première, first exhibition of the Indépendants. There was only one. And you get the date of 56th of April to 3 of May 41. Galerie Municipale, this is in Quebec. Again, this is not a famous place. Foyer du Palais Montcalm, this still exists. It's where the well, not the embassy, but let's say a consulate of France is situated in Quebec at this place. And catalog for 10 cents. You don't find any catalog for 10 cents anymore. Don't expect it. Or they give it to you, or they sell it at a reasonable price. And there's no such a thing. And this exhibition was organized by Father Couturier, that you see on the right, painted by Louise Gadebois, who was a painter at the time who was aware of the interests of Couturier and that have more or less created around his person certain activities, and that's why finally he got involved in this. This is one event in 41 was important, you will see, for Cosgrove. And the other event I will mention much later in my lecture, it is the Kingston Conference, also in 1941, in which, in the country, Cosgrove never went, and you will see why, but where Marian Scott was very much involved. So 41 is really a kind of annus, not horribilis, but annus crucis, if you want, a very important year for Canadian art. Who was this Father Couturier that you see there? He was a Dominican priest that was very much involved with modern art in France. You may have heard of La Chapelle d'Assy, for instance, or even the chapel in Vence, where Matisse was invited to create all the decor there. Well, Couturier was, let's say, the priest behind these type of projects. He was the one who made the contact with the modern artists and with the church, and he was always, of course, a staunch defender of modern art. And of course, in Quebec, this was like a benediction. You see, to have a priest who will speak favorably of Picasso, of Braque, of any movement of modern art. This was like a really bonanza. But mind you, in Quebec, these things happen. We still have a priest at the head of the Musée d'Art Contemporain. And this only in Quebec. All over the world, you cannot find things like that. Here, we still have these type of phenomena. So Couturier was certainly a kind of staunch defender of modern art in our milieu. He was stranded in New York, in the French parish of New York, during the war. That's why 41, of course, the Second World War have begun already, and that's why he was in America, if you want. And from time to time, he came in Quebec or in Montreal and met the people, let's say, even taught for a while at l'École des Beaux-Arts and at l'École du Meuble, and that's his way, if you want, to be in contact with all the artists. And he decided that it was important to make an exhibition of independent painters, and he organized it, and that's why I show you that there. The exhibition itself have Cosgrove among the exhibitor, but let's say, if you want to have an idea of the content of the exhibition, I show you two paintings. One by Bordua on the left side, surprisingly maybe, and on the right side it's Alfred Pellin. Bordua at the time in 41 is still a figurative painter. He made still life like this one with very strong unfolding, if you want, of the plane of the table, as if the table is almost tilt over toward us and all the fruits may have fell on us. And Pellin was the most avant-garde artist of this exhibition. This little picture, it's about this size. It's at the Musée d'Art Contemporain maintenant. And it's called Sous Terre, underground, if you want. and it's probably inspired by his 14 years in Paris before. Pellan came in Canada at the time in 1940, really with one of the last boats who could cross the Atlantic because of the war. He was one of the lucky ones who could escape. But before that, for 14 years, he was in Paris. And Pellan was a very curious man, very eager to get to all the new trends. And this, you could say, is a kind of a personal interpretation of all the trends that he have seen there. In a way, this exhibition could have been relatively quiet. But what happened, the director of the School of Fine Arts, of Montreal School of Fine Arts at the time, was called Charles Maillard, decided to write a kind of a little bit tricky article where he speaks very favorably of the exhibition here, but announced also that he's organizing himself another exhibition of the Independent with more numerous painters and sculptors, and that will give, like this one, he says, an undeniable proof of the quality of teaching in our School of Fine Arts. This was a little bit too much for the exhibitors there, because some of them were through the School of Fine Arts of Montreal, but they hated it, and they hated especially the teaching of Maillard. So they decided to not let this tricky type of praise, but in fact full of venom, if you want, they decided to protest. So the first thing that happened at Couturier, who was teaching at the École des Beaux-Arts a little bit before, got thanked for his service and decided to go to École du Meuble, and the School of Furniture instead. Why? Because it's there that you have Borduas teaching, and that you have Maurice Gagnon and Marcel Parisot, and a lot of people much more open to modern art. And in fact, Couturier was more happy there, if you want, than in the École des Beaux-Arts. You see him here with a student who doesn't seem to be very at ease, because the other guy on the right side is Monsieur Jean-Marie Gauvreau. He's the director of the school. So he wants to be photographed, of course, with Father Couturier. But the poor student seems to, will it finish? Huh? Will it be over? Oh, I forgot. Speaking of student, the student who are here, you are told that if you have not given yet your assignment for this course, it's still time to do it. Please bring it to the Secretary of Art History, Mrs. Joanne Anselmi. She has a little box there. You just have to put it there. At the latest tomorrow morning, I was told. The other thing also I wanted to tell you, it is that the slide I use for this lecture are accessible to you at the slide library at Concordia if you want to see them after or to review them. Okay, closing of the bracket. There's a kind of two discourse here, but what can I do? Okay, so the Couturier shift from École des Beaux-Arts to École du Meuble, like you see it here. And also, he decided to write a letter against Maillard, against the pretension of Maillard, because not only Maillard says that our school, the teaching in our fine art school is excellent, and you have the proof in this exhibition and the one I want to organize, but he accused also Couturier to be a kind of fauteur de trouble, somebody that bring trouble, that bring pandemonium in our system with these ideas, and with speaking about Picasso and things like that. This is terrible. He said, we don't want this. We have our own school and all that. So Couturier decided to reply to him. And this is the actual letter that he wrote to the newspaper. You see signature completely at the bottom on the right. And in this letter, he's quoting, in fact, a kind of a reply that was done by the artist of the Indépendant. And you have it's somewhere here in the middle. You have little brackets open here and finishing here. And there you have all the people who signed that letter. And I just read them. Louise Gadbois, so the one who was painting the portrait of Couturier, of John Lyman, Paul-Émile Borduas, Louis Moulstock, Jory Smith, Goodrich Roberts, Alfred Pellan, Philippe Seury, Eric Goldberg. So these artists are all telling Maillard the following. I would just well, it's in French, of course, but I will translate it in English. You say, we have read in a Quebec City newspaper dated May 5, a letter in which the director of the Montreal School of Fine Arts, announcing an exhibition which will be a reply to our own, acknowledge at the same time the quality of our works. But since, by the same token, he claims for his school the merit of our formation, we want, without making personal or offensive remarks, put the record straight on this subject. Let us be clear. As long as we were progressing in the knowledge of our art, we could not deplore the teaching methods of this school, and it took us years to disengage from their teaching, to forget their formulas and mental habits, in short, to disintoxicate us from there. So, if Marian wanted to have something peaceful, then the battle was on. You know, this is the beginning of the combat de l'art moderne, if you want, at the time. Huh? And okay, one detail here is pertinent to my Cosgrove story. Cosgrove didn't sign this letter. There's two people in the exhibition that didn't sign it, Cosgrove and Mary Bouchard. Well, Mary Bouchard is the author of this painting. She's certainly a very sweet lady and in my opinion, quite a very interesting and very beautiful painter. But she is put, for whatever reason, in the category of naive painter. In fact, she was absolutely no schooling whatsoever, and certainly not any schooling of art. She never go to a school of fine arts and things like that. She was painting on silk, or painting in the region of Baie-Saint-Paul. They had a place there was called Moulin à César, that still exists, that you could still visit, and in which all the family of the Bouchard, who have nothing to do with the ex-prime minister of Quebec, but all this family were producing art, and she was certainly one of the most talented of them. So she didn't sign the letter, probably because the group decided that they should not involve her in this thing because anyway she was far and will probably not want to be too compromised with this. Whatever the reason, she didn't sign it. With Cosgrove, of course, it's more troubling because if you don't sign a letter like this, in a way you take side with Maillard. But we have to be fair. At the time, Cosgrove was not in Montreal, was not even in Canada. He was in Mexico since 1939, since the end of 1939. And and that means that even his contribution to the exhibition of the Indépendant were not done by him. It was one of his friends, Jules Bazin, who was a collector of his work, that gave, let's say, the painting for the show in Quebec. And when the show came in Montreal, because it was presented also in Montreal after, Cosgrove was not even included. So you could say he was far, he was not really too much involved in this exhibition. It could explain his position. The other problem, of course, is what he really thinks about Maillard and about his teaching. This is something else on which I will come back a little bit later, let's say. But the fact of the matter, he was not there at the time when, mind you, there was Jacques de Tenancourt tried to wrote to him and tried to imply him in the thing, but apparently it was too late. And when the reply of Cosgrove came, the whole debate was already over. Okay, surely it would be exaggerated, let's say, to make of this little event, this debate, if you want, the end of academism and all that, and the first combat, if you want, the first fight about modern art. There will be many others after. And I show you on the right side there little stickers that were used by the student of the School of Fine Arts. Mind you, this is not a suggestion I give to the actual Concordia people to begin to do these things, even for historical reason, you know. But indeed, at the time these things were done, let's say in 1945, so a little bit after that, there was the annual show of the student of the School of Fine Arts, and they decided to print these little stickers. They are big like this. Yeah, of course, I show it in slide here. They look huge. And they glued them all over the place in the exhibition of Fine Arts. And Maillard, of course, was absolutely crazy with furor when he saw that, because he was taken à bas Maillard et l'académisme. You have the two things, à bas Maillard et l'académisme. He will resign, not because of that, but because he was a very type militaristic man. He will stuff it and all this, but he will resign one season later from the direction of the School of Fine Arts. So there's certainly this aspect, but there's another aspect, I think, to my mind, which is more important. It is when you touch the teaching, the system of teaching in Quebec at the time, and even now, I would say, you are teaching something you have very politically charged. The school have been always seen in Quebec politics, let's say, the place where you maintain the French language and the Catholic religion and all that. And so the moment somebody seems to attack, especially a priest, you know, like Father Couturier, who attacked our system of teaching, even in a thing as marginal as the School of Fine Arts, there was a big issue there. There was a big political issue. And because, in a way, the school was always responsible of the famous identité québécoise. Let's say the Quebec identity was more or less the responsibility of the schooling system. And so when you touch that, of course, right away, you are in a kind of more politically charged type of situation. In the case of Maillard, we know what was exactly his idea about national identity and about, let's say, Quebec identity. I show you one of his paintings, because, of course, he was teaching, he was the director of the school, but he was teaching also the course of painting at the École des Beaux-Arts. And I show you one of his paintings, which is typical of the type of ideas also that he is defending. You see his signature in the bottom. Maillard, it's written M-A-I-L-L-A-R-D, Maillard, Charles Maillard. And he says, for instance, I would quote you a few of his declarations. I tried to put them in a certain logical order, if not chronological, but at least you will see which kind of ideas he had. And it is important to understand that because, as I will show you later, Cosgrove was very much impressed by the idea of Maillard. Okay, first idea, it's something that Maillard published in Le Canada. Le Canada was a newspaper at the time, in 1927, in which he explained what he wanted to do with his school. He says, I want to make a real Canadian institution with this. And I want that my school will be able to participate to the Canadian art movement, to give really, to contribute to it. But then he had, and then be careful, you will see a little bit the twist of the thinking of the man, how he goes. The one thing is sure, we do not want to establish here a French school. To do so will be to kill the beautiful artistic endeavors of the French Canadian and the Anglo-Canadian. Sure enough, we must transmit the Latin culture that France have preserved admirably. But our school must stay a Canadian institution, even if its culture comes from teachers immigrated from France, which was his case in particular. Maillard was born in Algeria, and he was a pied noir, he was really completely French. And he came in Canada when he was about 18, but then you have this affirmation. If you notice, he doesn't want to make a French school, he says. And he speaks of Latin culture, as if this Latin culture is it's not French culture. Latin is more vague. It could, maybe some Anglophone could find themselves Latin, for all I know. You could just get in this big category like this. And this, why this idea of stressing the fact that you want a Canadian school? Was it because he was afraid of the new movement that you had in French art at the time. And this is certainly I have played. France could be two things. It could be La Vieille France, in which you could identify all the rightist idea that you want, but it could be also La France des libertés. And of course, La France de l'École de Paris, of all the new waves of Cubism, Surrealism, and everything. And this, you could think that Maillard didn't want that too much in his school. He has certainly, like it's written here, an idea of a very academic type of training in which you learn to draw, and to put a little bit of color after 3 years, and a lot of plasters, and to copy it and things like that. So really, the academic type of school. But there was something else in this suspicion of a French school, if you want. It is that, like many other people at the time, Maillard was worried about the fate of the national tradition in modern art. A kind of fear of the internationalization of modern art. And then I quote, and for me this is a kind of horrible type of statement, but anyway, that's what he says. 24 of January 1931 in a conference, in a lecture that was called À la conquête d'un domaine, the conquest of a domain, meaning we have to conquest a Canadian identity, a domain. He says, art must be national before being human. This is very strong. A people without tradition is unable to produce a sensitive work of art. In France, one encounters a movement of international art which constitute for French art a great danger. The same dangers threaten our young country. We have to do everything in our power to preserve the national character of our art. And this is quite important because in a way this explains this idea of not wanting to have a French art here, because the French art there will be modern art and will be in fact not French, it will be international. And so by stressing the fact that he wanted to make a Canadian school here, he stressed the fact that he is against this international trend. Then he goes on because against this internationalization, he explained where it comes from to this idea, and he says, I quote, some modern artists have tried to encompass the vast international field as if all peoples have suddenly become equal in education and thought. Think of the nomadic peoples without a native land who left no great name in the domain of the plastic arts. The nomadic people, is he thinking of the Visigoths, of the Goths, the Vandals? No, he's thinking of the only nomadic people who were pointed at this time in 1930. Don't forget the date there. And you will see, I continue the quotation, there is a deplorable artistic movement which has a terrible influence on art production. This movement has been initiated by the Jews, who have never produced any really artistic works and who pretend to dictate everything in art. So then you get the type of reasoning. You start with a kind of narrow nationalism, I could call it, then an anti-internationalism, then you go to who is international is people without land, without territory, the nomadic people, and who are the nomadic people are the Jews. So you have here a kind of blunt anti-Semitic type of statement behind this thing. The people without a country in 1931 that he's mentioning there is, of course, before the creation of Israel in 1948. You are in 17 years before. And also this idea, of course, of these people creating no art and left no great artists, and all that is, of course, ridiculous. And anyway, I think it defined well the man. Another things also that he attacked, and you will see all this, to me, represent a kind of constellation that you could really attach to a tradition in France at the time. It is also his anti-communism, for the same reason also. Communism is an international movement, and it's dangerous. We should also be against it. Today, one wants to make international painting like one does international politics or Bolshevik propaganda. Then he was asked, okay, this is very nice. That's what you don't want to do. But exactly what do you propose to your student to do? And then you have the positive side, let's say, of the program of Maillard. What I explained now is what he refused in a way, and now what he wanted to say, and who could be illustrated by this painting, he says. Robert Humilly asked him once if he is for regionalism in painting. And of course, yes, this is exactly what he says. I've indeed asked my students to take their inspiration from the Canadian nature and to deal with themes drawn from the history of Canada. One finds their subject matter able to feed the imagination. When you think of Cosgrove with these type of things, it seems very far apart. It's a religious subject and history of Canada, like the two main. But anyway, we will deal with this later. You still have two great inexhaustible themes: religious art, as required by our churches, which could be a school in itself, and that we have always recommended to you. And historic composition, so little touch upon to the present, although so precious to the child and to adult of a race. He used the word race like this all the time. Art is from nowhere, one year sometimes. Oh, wait. This is again, you will see the little point that he made. Art is from nowhere, one year sometimes. This is too easy, not to say specious reasoning. Man is linked to his milieu, whatever he says and whatever he does, unless he renounces to it. The artist easily moves from one country to the other and will remain for long hypnotized by the European masterpiece. But forgetting the Antaeus legend, he will remember it too late. Maillard had some letters, of course, and when he speaks of the Antaeus legend, I've found an illustration just because I didn't know what it was either. So I have to. That's why we teach. It's to learn, basically. But so the Antaeus was in the mythology a giant that was beget by Earth. Earth was the mother of Antaeus. And Hercules could not fight against him, could not succeed to put him down, if you want, as long as Antaeus has his feet on the ground. The moment he could lift him from the ground, like it is represented here, then he could really choke him and kill him like he had killed the lion and everything. And I don't know if the Greek ever thought of the nationalistic theme of Maillard, probably never, but what he meant is this. He says the only strength that you could get is when you are on the ground. The moment you detach from your land, then you are lost. You can be, and he says this is the lesson of this mythology. Okay, enough on Maillard, but I think it's important to see exactly which kind of idea we were dealing with. Retain this idea, basically, that these come from a kind of weariness about the fate of national tradition in modern art. These people like Maillard are obsessed by this idea. What will happen to the national identity of each country, Italy, France, and everything, and Canada, if you want. This is their big issue. You see, how can we save a kind of national character to the art? Like he says, art must be national before being human. In the case of Couturier, let's see, to show the other side, they are less interested in this national issue and more about the totalitarian regime that are indeed in Europe very important at the time. You have, of course, we are in war, Germany with Nazism and Italy with fascism, and you have even at the time, if you look at your date carefully, you still have the Germano-Sovietic Pact still on. The operation of Hitler against Russia will start in May, a little bit after these exhibitions were in April or February. And And what Couturier says in his little preface of the same exhibition of the Indépendant when it was presented in Montreal. At the time, it was presented at the Henry Morgan stores. People of my age knows exactly what Morgan is, but for the young people, I would say it's just the bait. This is exactly the same stores. And in the 5th floor, you had there a gallery where, because the Morgans were relatively good connoisseur of art and all that, and they wanted to have from time to time exhibition. So the exhibition was presented first in Quebec, moved to Montreal. Cosgrove was not included in the Montreal version of it, and the preface was written there by Couturier, in which he was pointing very specifically to the totalitarian regime. And he says, "We do not say that freedom in art is everything, and our respect for the exact and austere demands of Cubism could prove it. We say simply that freedom is the condition of everything, because we have witnessed in Europe, as a counter-proposition, the sterility of all the academic formulas and the total failure of the official art, have they been fascist, Nazi, or Stalinian." So the preoccupation is not so much on nationalism, and in a way, Couturier could be associated to the France Libre movement. During the war, as you know, yes, you have Vichy, people who are ready to collaborate with the Germans, but you have also the resistance. And being in America during the time, Couturier worked for the France Libre, in fact. So you could say there was a more open type of nationalism there. These people were fighting for France, but like de Gaulle. And not like Pétain, or like, and it's very paradoxical when you think of it, because Pétain, like many people of his generation who have known the First World War, were raised in the hatred of Germany. But he preferred to be with Hitler against any Republican type of coming back. Like Charles Maurras, for instance, used to say, if the Anglo-American win that war, in 1944, he was still saying that, he said, we will see back all the Jews and the Francs-maçons and the Freemason and all the people of the politic that we have succeeded to get rid of. Say, all the politicians of the left that we have succeeded to get rid of. So you could say against that, there is a kind of open type of nationalism, if I can call it that way, and surely Couturier will be closer to that. But on the other hand, his main preoccupation is not that. It's more these ideology that are behind the war and destroying all the modern world of the time. Okay, now what happened to Cosgrove in that context? Okay, Cosgrove was a student, and a good student at the School of Fine Arts in Montreal. He had Maillard as a teacher. And when he learned about the debate against Maillard, he was, like I tell you, in Mexico. But he wrote back to the Tenancourt who asked his advice, do you sign the letter with us? And he wrote back that he was not interested to participate to this debate. Well, he could have good excuse, it was too late for him, but what he says to a letter to the Tenancourt is the following. He says, what annoyed me in the critique against the school, it's its lack of objectivity. If I recall well, he says, we were free. We were not embrigadés and things like that. We were taught in due respect of our inclinations. As the school was respectful of the talent of each one, was not trying to put everybody in the same mold. He says, the polemic against Maillard and his teaching of painting is absolutely futile. Not exactly, but anyway. Anyway, I will always defend him. This is Cosgrove saying that. Okay. Now, okay, this is very nice to speak of ideas and all that, but how it works with a painting. I will put in parallel a Maillard painting, you could guess where he is, on the left side, of course, and a Cosgrove. And at first sight, you say, okay, this is really a kind of a nude of the worst kind. It comes from how to draw nude, let's say. Really, it's difficult to have a more academic type of painting. This is Maillard. It's now at the Musée du Québec. Le Musée de Montréal here, they didn't want to have one, I don't know, but the Musée du Québec have two of those things. But, okay. And I confronted to a Cosgrove picture, well, it's rather a charcoal drawing, if you want, done on the same subject. And indeed, at first sight, you find, we don't find any connection. Say, if Maillard had any influence on Cosgrove, it was not in the style of his painting, let's say. But there was an influence. There was an influence on two things. First, Cosgrove learned from Maillard to be suspectful of the European influence. He will always try to find other type of connection than with Europe. This is, I would say, the negative thing. And the positive, it is the belief that there's a possibility to make an authentic Canadian art by trying to find our own sources apart from any influence of the École de Paris, and they try to be ourselves, and there is a possibility to make a national art. Or like one critic will see, is it possible to be national and modern? This is exactly what Cosgrove will try to do. So, in a way, there is an influence of Maillard. The idea of be suspicious of Europe, of anything that comes from there, and on the other hand, there is a possibility to have a national modern art. Okay. If you want to see a kind of counterexample in the eyes of Cosgrove, it is interesting to see his opinion about Pelin. I show you one painting of Pelin that is very contemporary. Let's say it's called La Surprise Académique, the academic surprise. It's almost the surprise of the academicians, I would say, almost. It represents the artist as a kind of clown getting out of a box. Let's say these type of games that we used to have to scare the children. I don't know for what purpose, but you turn a little manivelle and suddenly it opens and a serpent came out or something like that. Well, this is not good for people with heart condition. So the artist is represented like that, and near him there's a huge colossus that fell on the ground. I don't know if you see it, he's here. You have his hand here, and his shoulders, and his head, and another shoulders here. So as if when the artist come out, boom, this thing fell, and you see that the little dogs there really don't believe what happened. He have many eyes suddenly, and so he wants to show the La Surprise Académique. Let's say it's almost his own hiring by the School of Fine Arts. As a teacher, Pelin started his career at the School of Fine Arts in 1943, the date of this picture, and he was hired by Charles Maillard, because Maillard wanted to have a modern artist in his school, because he was, of course, in competition with the School of Fine Arts where Bordeaux was, so he wanted to have also his vedette, you know, and so he was ready to even tolerate this guy. But let's see what Cosgrove thought of the art of Pelin. You will see for him it's a kind of a counterexample. This is the thing we should not do, this type of painting. What Cosgrove says, he says, I cannot say that Pelin is not a good painter. Obviously he is. But that's it. It's not so bad to be good. But anyway, but that's it. I do not see here much originality. He is only one of us doing what thousands of others have done on the other side of the ocean and still do in the United States and don't do in Mexico. This is interesting because this will be the alternative for Cosgrove. The idea that you could maybe find model out of Europe of a national art who is also contemporary, who is also modern. Okay, so the story goes like this. Cosgrove wanted to learn fresco painting. He wanted to be, I would say, an artist who has social dimension to his art at the beginning. And you see here a little drawing on the left that he made, a project for a fresco that he could never really execute, but probably some religious subject. It seems to be, to me, like a presentation to the temple or something of that nature. On the right side, this is the only, to my knowledge, fresco that Cosgrove succeeded to do, really. It is in the Collège Saint-Laurent, or well, it's now a cégep in Ville Saint-Laurent, and I don't know if they still kept it, but in which you see figures representing different science, philosophy, and things, say for the school there. So that was the idea of Cosgrove to start with. After his School of Fine Arts, after finishing as a student there, he wanted to go to Europe, of course, to learn how to paint fresco. He wanted to see the Great Museum of Europe, also to really renew his... And he was interested also in what was called at the time domestic art, meaning applied art, pottery. He used to go to Charlevoix-Comté, and he was interested by what the people were doing there, say, les tapis crochetés, and all these things of the tourist things. And he thought, well, in France also, there certainly have a lot of these popular traditions, folk traditions that I could learn from. But of course, when he made this plan, the war started and he could not go to Europe. And then he thought, why not to go to Mexico instead? Because in Mexico, there's indeed great painters who make fresco, and I could learn fresco from them. And of course, there's not great museum like in Europe, but on the other hand, many of the masterpieces of the Museum of Europe were in the States at the time, and even in Canada. As you know, to save the masterpiece, some great museums like the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam have created a huge container full of their works of art and send them to make tours in different American institutions or museums in order to preserve them from destruction. So in a way, to go in Europe was not the place to see the real masterpiece. It was better to go in New York, let's say, or on the way to stop in different American cities, and this is exactly what he did. He went then to Mexico, and then, of course, he was confronted to a art very different from the School of Paris, let's say, and I just want to evoke a little bit this type of painting that he will see in order to see the kind of shock that it will be in his upbringing. One of the painting is by Orozco, Jose Clemente Orozco, and Cosgrove will have the chance to meet him and to work with him for a period of 8 months at the very end of his stay in Mexico. He's there since, let's say, the January 1940 to 43. But the last month of this period, he will be a student of Orozco. And what happened, what revealed to him, in a way, it is here you have a kind of official art, a national art, who is also interesting in terms of content and in terms of style. And in a way, it was a kind of counterexample to the fascist type of art or the Nazi art that Couturier was pointing at. If there was one exception of this type of national art, it was Mexican art. They succeeded to make an art of their own, typical of their country, with the problem of the people. Like, for instance, here, Orozco play on the religious feeling of the people, as if Christ will destroy his cross because the people don't change. He says we are still in war, we are still in starvation everywhere, and there were still, and of course because of the war period, all this was very striking, let's see, that even Christ will break his own cross to show us that he is no more with us or something. So he was really trying to speak of the problem of his time, and also in a language that will be both new, modern, if you want, but also accessible to the masses. And there was some very peculiar type of condition that will explain this at the time. You have under President Obregon, fantastic minister of culture. Sometimes it happens, you know, some politicians, minister of culture are fantastic, was called Vasconcelos. And Vasconcelos decided that art is important for the people. We should commission great work of art to be in public place, not just collected by the happy few, but really in public places. And so he commissioned people like Rivera, like Siqueiros, and Orozco, the Los Tres Grandes, like they are called there, and they are still considered like this. And indeed, these guys were able to paint whatever they wanted in public places. Rivera was a staunch Marxist, let's say, and very often opposed the poor Indians against the bad, the conquistadores, Spanish conquistadores. And Siqueiros was even Stalinian. He was even going much further. Orozco is special in a way because he started like the others, very leftist, but with time he became more and more critical of any ideologies, from the left, from the right, whatever ideology. He was like advocating rather the individualism, man alone, against God, against the nation, against any type of collective ideas, and with time. And what happened after, when Obregón was replaced, because in politics, of course, this thing happened, by Calles, who was the next prime minister at the time. Calles was much more conservative than Obregón. Even if, of course, all these people call themselves national revolutionary and all this, but they become, he pretended to be a socialist, but he was also buying huge lands. Anyway, well, so Calles suddenly began to be less and less interested in art and in these artists, and indeed they didn't have any more contracts, so they decided to move from Mexico toward America, toward the United States. And Orozco was one of the first to do that. Another also who do that is Rivera. Here I show you a huge mural that he did in Detroit, consecrated to the work, the kind of Taylor line that you have in the construction of automobile. And you see on the right just a detail of that. Okay, so Rivera also, as you know, will be involved with this huge painting that he wanted in the Rockefeller Center, in which he wanted to put Lenin and Stalin and all that, all these people like in the heaven there, and of course it was not liked by Monsieur Rockefeller, and he had the thing covered and things. But anyway, so they were moving from Mexico toward the United States. This is important because also Orozco have done it even more than anybody else, and because of that they could communicate in English. And mind you, after 3 years in Mexico, Cosgrove was also Spanish, fluent in Spanish. He could do it. I will show you just one example or two of these projects that Orozco did in the United States. This one is just a detail of a fresco who represents Gandhi, of course, that was done in New York at the New School of Social Research, the place where Thomas Hart Benton have also made some of his contribution. In the same school, there was Orozco on some walls and Benton on the others. I told you that in the ideology of Orozco is interesting because in a way he detached himself from to be too political. And he went so far as to even presented Cortés, who was seen as the arch enemy, of course, by Rivera and even more by Siqueiros. He presented Cortés as the man alone, the man who had been betrayed both by Spain and also that was fighting the bloody empire of the Aztec. So he made a kind of hero of him, which is very unusual, of course, in the type of presentation. But I have to tell you, for Orozco, with time, he became more and more suspicious of any ideology, and he thought that people like Cortés will rather be a good example, a better hero. So, as I told you, Cosgrove ended up as a student of Orozco. He was presented by some mutual friends who are teaching at the University of Mexico. And at first he was very scared because Orozco had a very bad reputation of being not an easy man to deal with and all that. And in the contrary, he was very nice with Cosgrove. Cosgrove tells the story that Orozco was in the state and wanted to see Niagara Falls from the Canadian side, but was stopped at the frontier by some imbecile, I don't know, some custom officers that didn't know to whom he was speaking about. And a Mexican, no, a Mexican doesn't enter here, ça finit là. Alors but he was telling that not with any bitter feelings, just as a joke. You are Canadian, so I have a little Canadian adventure to tell you. Huh? And what happened, okay, so you see him on the right, this is Orozco, and on the left, of course, is Cosgrove, and they are discussing a project, because indeed, Cosgrove was hired at the time by Orozco because Orozco was starting a new project in school, in a chapel that was called the Chapel of Jesus, I guess, the Nazareno in Mexico, was in a very old institution. And from the time of the first arrival of Cortés, of the Spanish in Mexico, and he wanted to make a kind of apocalyptic type of theme, because this is a little bit the theme that will occupy his mind at the end of his life. He became more and more pessimistic about humanity, and so it was an apocalyptic theme that goes, of course, with the war. Unfortunately, they didn't have the money to finish the painting, and Cosgrove could work with him to this. You see, he's hiring a few students, few American students also, because the language was not a problem with that. Huh? And when Cosgrove came back to Canada, he was interviewed by people asking him, what was the influence of Cosgrove, of Orozco on you? Did he make any impact and all of this? And one of the journalists who asked him that was Robert Hare. That is a very famous art critic. And Cosgrove tell him, he says, in terms of technique of the fresco and all that, I wanted to learn there. I don't remember much of what he taught me. He says I have to really relearn it from books and things like that. But there is something much more important that I owe to Orozco. He says, I have told you only what I didn't get from him. But one thing I got from him was humility. I never felt that he was the great man exploiting his personality and throwing his weight around. I was impressed above all by his sincerity, integrity, and simplicity, by the creative force of a man who invented a style which was to me a plastic, aesthetic pleasure, although it had nothing of the aesthetic theories that surround us. I was hypnotized by the man. There was something big to reach up to his spirit, something beyond mere superficial influence. I wish we could have an Orozco exhibition in Canada. We would know that great art comes to a nation when the artist feels that he is serving. Ça c'est très important aussi. What Orozco is teaching him, it is what he called humility. I would say it's an attack on individualism. It's the collective aspect pass first. The artist is serving the nation. It's not the other way around. It's not the nation is just there to foster individualism of each person, but it's something to be served. And of course, the humility, or I would say almost the effacement of the artist that is behind this, is a kind of appeal to Cosgrove. It's something that he thinks that he can do also. He says, Orozco works was for the people, you know. He tell that to Robert Hare. He never believed that art was exclusive. He never believed in painting for a narrow circle of 5 or 10. His work appeals to everyone, the peon as well as the cultivated. Again, an art that addresses itself to the public, that attach enormous importance to the public. And this is an idea that will be repeated in a very different context a little bit later, but in between there was a big, something quite disagreeable for Cosgrove happened. And he met after another critic who's called Roland Boulanger, and then you know that Cosgrove is perfectly fluent in French also, right? So he's quoted sometime in English, sometime in French. His wife, his first wife at least, was Claire Letourneau. She was a French speaking. And but then again, he says he quote Orozco saying, for instance, never consider the public as ignorant, otherwise you will end up in narcissism in painting. Never consider the public as ignorant. Don't fall in the error of those who preach art for art's sake. There is something else than pure art. There is the public. The artist cannot really bloom and prosper without making his art serve society. The worst danger is to think that you can be self-sufficient. This is the type of things that Cosgrove remember from horoscope. And I tell you why he said that to Boulanger, because there was something that was happening at the time, that there was in this museum here every year a spring show. And the spring show, of course, was the time where every artist wanted to be and to be recognized, all that. There was not too many occasions like this. And I don't know which wizard had this idea, but at a certain time they decided to have two juries. One jury for the academic type of painting and one jury for the modern. This is wonderful because everybody can enter with this. If you are not sure, well, you put your painting in one slit or the other. Anyway. The jury, in 1950, the jury of the modern, because the other one doesn't interest me really, but the modern one was, as a president, they had Stanley Cosgrove, they had Jacques de Tonnancourt, and Goodrich Roberts. Okay. Then, of course, in 50, the automatists and all these people are wanting to go to the spring show also. And these three guys decided to stop this crazy painting that they didn't like and all that, and they refused the work of Marcel Barbeau, of Marcel Ferron, and of Musso. So right away, they decided to make a march of protestation, in protest to what happened in the museum. Again, this is not a suggestion to students here. It's just, this is purely historical. And so what they did, they went to Musso Atelier, and then they prepared kind of long, how do you call it, ham sandwich? See, you have two, how do you say? Sandwich board. Sandwich board, okay, with insult written on it to the jurors. Like, for instance, Cosgrove, Le Maudit, really, and sometimes quite scatological, very not nice, you know. So they had this, and then they said, yes, but how we will enter at the opening of the exhibition of the spring show? Roussel at the time was teaching here at the school, and he says, no problem. And he says, I have my entrance in the museum. I will get you invitation. So he came, and he found a piles of invitation on the desk of a secretary. He took it. So everybody of the group have their sandwich like this in paper, so close in this. They show their invitation. They came in. There was it's no more like it was at the time, but let's say near the big stairs that you have in this part of the museum, there was a big hall there. They all get there, put their ham sandwich, and become 17 of them to walk slowly without saying a word among the nice crowd, of course, there. And everybody was with tuxedos and things. And there was some announcement that the city of Montreal was generous enough to give $10,000 to the museum. Imagine with $10,000 today, we will not even wash the place. But anyway, and so they were bragging about their generosity, and suddenly these guys come there, see? And Musso told me the story because he was there. He says, I was opening the march, and I see right away the two guards running toward me. And they were looking at but they were Anglophone, so they didn't know how to read. How to read the insult. So they let them go. But all this, I've stayed only about 5 minutes and all that. But I tell you, and after they decided to make an exposition des refusés, alors they have, on Stanley Street, nearby here, they have this huge poster outside, d'exposition des rebelles, of rebellious, contre l'arrivisme bourgeois, infestant le jury d'art le jury de l'Art Association. Ah oui, because at the time, the museum was, well, it was, from 1948, it was called the Museum of Fine Arts. But before that, it was called the Art Association of Montreal. So that's why they call it that way. And they have organize an exhibition of all the paintings that have been refused by the jury. So Barbeau, Ferron, and all this, but not, of course, by the jury academique, just by the jury moderne. And what you see on the picture on the left is Claude Gauvreau, is one of the organizers of this thing. Okay, now I think if you go back to Cosgrove and what I was quoting before, and you think that he just have lived through this, you could say that this claim of an art who is for the public, who is accessible to the public, could be one of the motivations why he refused the automatist painting that were shown there. But of course, for the young at the time, he was bourgeois, whatever. He was on the other side of the thing. But I think this is interesting because it gives you the context of these reminiscence of Orozco saying in Cosgrove. Okay. Let's see now how the idea of both of Maillard and of Orozco, in a way, they are not so far apart. And even if in style they are very different, in both cases you have this idea of a national heart, of a heart for the collectivity, of a heart that could be accessible to the public rather than to be too cryptic and too individualistic. So even if they don't look alike, you could say on Cosgrove they had the same impact in a way. And really, you could say, you could define his attempt to do was a kind of synthesis, let's say, of modernism and nationalism. But is it real? Is it what we see in the painting? And this, you will see it's not so easy to find. I will try to make a convincing argument with this. For instance, well, let's start with the painting and with the theme that were mostly done by Cosgrove. You have, as I tell you, the grand genre all the time, the great genre of painting, like still life, for instance. When you look at this and you think of all the ideas that have agitated here since the beginning, you don't see much the connection. You say, okay, this is very austere. You understand the type of color is used, seems like fresco colors, really reduced to a minimum, 3 cherries on a plate, and then 3 maybe lemons or whatever fruit are on the other one. Very minimal type of presentation, making maybe more sense if you compare it to Cézanne, let's say, than to Orozco, or to Maillard, for that matter, because in Cézanne also you have this kind of folding over of the table toward us. You have this kind of plane, let's say, in the bottom of the picture, like this, that the French call the plan repoussoir, because it creates a distance between you and the subject. To be able to see the little drawer there, you have to be at a certain distance. If you are too close to it, you cannot see, you will not see the side. And this, of course, it is because Cézanne basically wants us to contemplate what is there. It's not food to take or to enjoy. It's a thing to look at. And you could say, well, Cosgrove is in the same type of approach, at first sight at least. When with time, if you look at the picture, the still life, of course, was much later in time. Let's see, this one is of 1968, and the one I was showing you before was 1946. It reminds me rather of another artist that I know that Cosgrove used to admire a lot, who is called Morandi. And Morandi is a painter, an Italian painter who lived in Bologna all his life. A little bit, he was mixed a little bit with futurism for a while, and also with the Chirico metaphysical painting, but after he did all these very minimal type of little still life, doing with almost nothing all the time in a kind of very poetic and very minimal also type of painting. And you could, again, see more kinship, let's say, of the Cosgrove still life with this type of painting than with Orozco. The same thing could be said also about the numerous head that we see, or woman representation that we see in Cosgrove work. Okay, you have still life and you have this kind of very generalized type of portrait. These women are a little bit mysterious. They look peaceful, they have a certain serenity about them, even sometimes some kindness, I would say. And they all look alike. You have many, many of these pictures in Cosgrove works. And again, they don't have the stridence, the hunger and the power that you have in Orozco painting that I showed you before. It's a mile apart between them. And finally, the landscape of Cosgrove are certainly not, we spoke of the sublime, I think, two lectures ago about Harris, but there has nothing to do with the sublime here. And it's even, Roberts and Milne seems over-occupied in comparison with that. It's so generalized again. It's hard to localize. Sometime he gave in this title where it's taken from. For instance, the one on the left is called Sérénité in La Tuque. La Tuque is a little place near, in between Montreal and Ottawa. And the other is not, it's called Landscape. So it can be any place in Canada in a way. So again, and this is a genre, of course, that nor, let's say, Maillard or nor Orozco have practiced much, and indeed there is then this kind of problem. And I would like also to see if these three themes, the still life, the landscape, and the portrait, are not linked in a certain way. This is the big question I had all the time. I will make a pause now and I will answer it after. Okay. Okay, we will break for 10 minutes and we'll try to answer that.